for waiting. Brilliant. Thank you all for being here. Good morning, good afternoon. I hope you're all feeling hot enough. We put on the heating for you. I'm Jamie Credland from the World Media Group. It's an alliance of the world's most trusted news brands, and we exist to promote the value of news brands and news environments for advertisers and agencies. This morning, you've heard lots about that. If you've been here all morning, you've heard lots of talk about the value of news environments, some of the research in that space. Now we're going to take a slightly different tack, slightly different perspective, take a step back and talk to the editors, talk to the editorial leaders who are creating these quality environments. And we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about their jobs, how the role of journalism, the practicalities of doing journalism is changing. And we're going to talk about some of the biggest news stories in the world right now, specifically focused around business, around consumer confidence, around business decision making. Because if you work in advertising, and I'm assuming you do because you're at Cannes Lions, these things matter. They affect how businesses are going to be making decisions in the next 12 months. So, to join me in doing that, we have an incredible panel, a truly global panel. First up, we have Emma Tucker, Editor-in-Chief of the Wall Street Journal. We have Gregor Schmitz, Editor-in-Chief of Stern. And we have Ellana Lee, Group Senior Vice President and GM for APAC at CNN. Let's give them a round of applause, please. Brilliant. Right. Emma, we're a long way away, aren't we? But anyway, Emma, we're going to start with you, if that's all right. You moved to the US to lead Wall Street Journal about 2.5 years ago now. I think it was February 2023. And when you moved, a lot of the conversation was around the differences between the US news environment and the UK news environment. Now that you've been there a couple of years, has the news environment in the US changed over the last 2.5 years? Are you seeing a shift in terms of how reporting gets done?
I think if there's been a shift, there's a greater acknowledgement generally within the industry that the industry itself is facing a crisis. When I got there, the US is a very different market from Europe. I can't remember a time in Europe, in journalism, where my back wasn't up against the wall. Whereas in the US, it's obviously, it's been insulated from some of these market forces. On the reporting front, yes, there has been a shift because, we have a new Trump administration and that poses its own challenges to reporters. I wasn't there the last time there was a Trump administration, but the minute I arrived in, it became apparent that he could win the next election. We were, I was very much told, expect a fire hose of news. That's what we've had. But in a bold move, I restructured my DC bureau a year before the election, and that allowed us to be in good shape now for what is an incredible moment in the news cycle. Huge amount of uncertainty, and very much a moment when people are turning to the Wall Street Journal to help it make sense of what's going on.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I saw. And this weekend, Trump was standing in front of the US Army and calling out journalists and misinformation. I think that it must be a tough environment in some cases for your team.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back at all. He quite often criticizes us publicly. He berated one of my reporters on Air Force One in front of everybody. But it's transparent. At least we know what he thinks, and we can hold our heads up. But yeah, it's an interesting moment when you're a reporter and the President of the United States is calling you out publicly on social media. That takes some guts.
Wow, unprecedented, I think. And at least in my news diet, I hear a lot about that in the US. But Gregor, coming to you and looking at Germany, of course, in a world where many of the biggest players on the global stage are US tech companies, that affects reporting in Germany as well, right?
Well, definitely that affects reporting, and it has affected heavily our business model, obviously. I want to tell them right here, give us the money back that you stole from us over the years. So it has been a big blow to the business model. As to the reporting side, I liked your diplomatic way of putting it. It's not just unprecedented, it's on a daily basis unprecedented, not just in the US, but also increasingly in Europe and Germany. You've seen more even physical attacks on journalists lately. You have seen the rise of right-wing movements in Germany, people that are very, very critical of the institutions, similar to the US again, and lose confidence in the press, the media, even though our media landscape is somehow different. I think we are still a little less partisan, less polarized than the outlets in the US. I think our business model is still working somehow better, particularly with regional newspapers. So the underlying structure is more solid, but we're seeing it under attack. And we've seen it at Stern, for example, with Elon Musk several times over the past months. We published a cover story on his interference or his alleged interference in the German elections. And we showed him alongside Vladimir Putin, which he didn't really like. And he wrote a message on X saying, well, it's typical, I saw that coming from the legacy media, that's us, and it's only going to help the AfD to win the election. The AfD didn't win the election, but he did everything he could to make it happen, hosting town hall meetings on X with Alice Weidel, the leader of the right-wing movement. So, yeah, and you see J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Conference berating us. So it's an interesting time. In a way, it's bad for democracy, but it's still good for business because people read these stories.
Yeah, no, I think we heard earlier this morning about the news junkies audience, and those people are still reading. They still want to know more about it than ever. And as you say, it's more important than ever to be reporting on that stuff. Ellana, you're based out in Hong Kong, and you've been with CNN for a long time. I was curious, has the role of Asia reporting and reporting from that region changed over time within CNN? Have those stories taken on a different aspect?
I would say two things. Number one, it's kind of ironic to hear about how things have moved on, changed. I think about 3-4 years ago, our colleagues would be calling us up and say, are you guys okay? Is it okay to be a journalist in Hong Kong? Today, I think we're calling our US colleagues up and saying, are you okay? Is it okay to be a journalist in the United States? So things have evolved and changed dramatically. Despite that, for us in Hong Kong, I'm in Hong Kong because it's our Asia headquarters for Asia Pacific for CNN. And what we've done in the last, I would say maybe 7 months, we've taken on a new type of transformation. So we actually inherit a follow the sun model where we take on the US news. So we've actually built a team. I increased the team by about 20% just this year alone, where we are taking on the news that starts from the United States, such as the LA demonstration, such as the wildfires. And a lot of the things that's taking place in the Middle East actually happens to fall in early Asia morning. So in that sense, we've definitely changed our structure. But I would say in terms of the value of the news that comes from Asia Pacific, it is dramatically different. Clearly, 10 years ago, you're probably trying to pry your way into getting your stories on the front digital page, on the news programs in primetime USA. But now, the demand is very high because of the situation that's happening with the United States and specifically with China. So the issues are becoming more severe. The topics are becoming also very interesting. It's not just politics. It's not just tariffs. It's a lot about, the way of life is taking place in Asia. There's a lot of interest we're finding. So yes, right now, I would say Asia Pacific is increasingly becoming far more critical in terms of the content of the news that we provide our audience.
Yeah, I think that we can see that, and that makes sense that the nature of journalism is changing. And in fact, coming back to everything you've all said, all of these things make journalism more expensive and harder to do. And I think in that environment, it becomes more critical than ever that there are strong business models behind them that support them and enable you to do that work. And one of the pieces of work you've collectively all been doing, reporting on the global economy, which is clearly very, very important to all of us working in advertising. I was here last year. I don't think I heard a single person mention the word tariff last year on the beach in Cannes. Maybe I was at the wrong parties. But right now, I suspect it's going to be a theme for the whole week. It really impacts a lot of global brands. It impacts how we're going to do business. As a starting point, Emma, could you give us a kind of where we're up to now and what the impacts might be? Because as a lay non-editor, the story seems to have changed quite a few times.
Well, when President Trump spoke a lot in his campaign about his desire to do something about the big trade imbalances affecting America. And he was true to his word. When he came in, he very quickly moved to impose tariffs in a somewhat scattergun way, let's face it. But it's really important to understand that Trump loves tariffs. He believes in them. He thinks they're a great way to sort out these trade imbalances and bring revenue to the US. So He came in. I think what happened then, there was a sort of seesawing around tariffs. A lot of announcements were made, then they'd be escalated, then they'd be de-escalated, then something else would happen. So there was a lot of up and down, a huge amount of uncertainty, which was not good for business or consumer sentiment. Now, it's interesting that as a result of all this, the only deal that has been done was the somewhat uninspiring and really rather lame trade deal that was done with the UK. No offence to the UK or the US, but it wasn't a model that other countries were likely to be able to copy. Most of the work had already been done for that trade deal. Meanwhile, there's still this uncertainty out there. Nobody quite knows where we're going to land. And I would say as well, I think there now is a degree of boy who cried wolf around it. Some of the shock and awe around these announcements has lost their impact. Having said that, the deadline for the 90-day reprieve that's due to come up in July is hanging over all of us. I think one other thing to point out is when these talks in London took place between China and the US, and obviously that is the big one that's most going to affect the global economy, interestingly, the talk didn't really revolve around tariffs anymore. It was around export controls, the fact that the US relies on China for various critical minerals, and the fact that China needs access to US chips and semiconductors. So interestingly, we've already moved on from tariffs, and we're talking about export controls. So the debate is fluid, I would say.
It's fluid. And obviously you're speaking to business leaders as well all the time. Are they feeling then a little bit more confident, that boy who cried wolf aspects? Is it?
I think there are two responses. One is there is no doubt that it's created an enormous amount of uncertainty. But there is also now, because of all this seesawing and uncertainty, a slight degree of, well, we're just going to keep buggering on because, without knowing where we're going to land. I mean, I spoke to the chief executive of one of the biggest banks in New York, and he was pretty sanguine. He was like, the S&P will keep rising, the sun will keep coming up every day, the US economy is a big thing. I mean, I think he was more sort of like, how else are we going to respond to this?
Yeah. Gregor, did you want to come in on that?
Well, I mean, I think Emma pointed out brilliantly, Trump has been very consistent on tariffs. I mean, he has been very consistent on tariffs, and he has been very consistent on singling out Germany, actually. I mean, you can go on YouTube and watch videos of him railing against German cars in the streets of New York in the 1970s. So that has been a consistent theme. So when Chancellor Merz actually traveled to Washington roughly a week ago, afterwards everybody was relieved that he didn't get into an argument with Trump at the White House or at the Oval Office, which is astonishing. I mean, for one of the staunchest US allies for that to expect. But yeah, it is a problem, and for Germany it is particularly tough because the German business model has relied on three factors in the past. That was cheap energy from Russia, huge exports to China, and a world order that is basically guaranteed and underwritten by the United States, or a trade order. And all three items are beginning to fall apart. So it is tough for us, and there are some industries, of course, that are more affected, like the chemical industry and cars and so. Others, I mean, probably the French worry more about wine and food than we do, but overall it is a blow to us, and it's particularly difficult right now because we have been in the third year of a recession anyway, so it's not like we are booming.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to remember that every single country has its own economic problems or its own economic challenges, so everyone is responding
that makes
very
a
differently.
Unified response so much more difficult.
Yeah, exactly. And Ellana, I wanted to come to you on that because a lot of the coverage I see is based on, I guess, the US putting tariffs out into the world. Where you are, you have a much better perspective on what the impact of that is for China and how China may respond. Does it feel as bad as people make out?
No, I think it's bad. I think everyone here on the panel will understand it, that everybody goes into this understanding that there is a lot of truth to what President Trump has said. There is an umbrella economic security. There is a military security that the rest of the world has enjoyed for the last couple of decades. He wants to write it, but the methodology of how you're writing it, when you're sitting in Asia, it no longer seems like a negotiation or a discussion. It seems like a punishment. And we cover tariffs on a daily basis. You'll get it from us. But what we're also trying to cover is that why is this taking place? So on the flip side, for us, what I find a little bit more interesting, aside from the tariffs that, you wake up on a Monday, it's one edict, on a Wednesday, it's something different, is how is this changing the region? So while President Trump is trying to make America great, he is making China great. He is making Asia great. So on the short term, there might be a lot of pains, and you've all heard about it, you've read about it, but in the long term, there is going to be a lot of an explosion of innovations that's taking place. So for instance, in China, right, in the US, you're talking about driverless cars. Where I sit in Hong Kong, we're talking about pilotless cars. We're talking about Hong Kong just last week have gotten our first drone delivery service taking place. In China, it's taking place on a daily basis. They've got 100 companies looking after EVs. And it's actually quite astonishing when a phone company just a couple years ago is now one of the greatest EV car makers. So all of this is pushing China, pushing Asia to a level of innovation that I'm not so sure America can keep up with in the long term. And the other thing I would say, though, is that the tariffs, which I feel it's a very government-to-government conversation, fight, it's really hard, it's really unfortunate from where I see it when it becomes very personal. When it starts attacking children's education, when it starts attacking where they're coming from. And so it becomes really personal. And you've got now kids now in the summer months, they're not sure they're gonna get their visas to go back to the United States to study. And so I just think it just crosses multiple red lines. And those are the things that we're looking at.
Thank you. I think that really brings to life the impact that these tariffs are having on real people, as you say, and real businesses. And your point about the technology piece is also fascinating to me. We're going to come on to that, but so in China there's a drone or Hong Kong drone delivery of coffee, and things that in Europe we can only dream about, where contactless payment is still not 100% accurate all the time. I wanted Emma to talk to you about the kind of American AI boom, the technology boom. A lot of this week is going to be about AI in the world of marketing and tech. Marketing and advertising. But is this kind of run going to just carry on? Can you see like broader business? It seems like a very small number of companies are actually doing very well out of it. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it is, and I think it's somewhat worrying as well, because when you have this huge concentration of money and power and sort of technological know-how concentrated like this, there's no question that stifles smaller companies and innovation. It means that the big companies are getting to shape everything, whether they're shaping the actual technology or indeed the ethics around it, all sorts of questions. And I think as well there's a geopolitical element to it as well. You've got these big companies in, again, China and the US shaping the future of AI, putting all their money, these huge investments. Europe, frankly, is nowhere in this, which is, I think, a worry for Europe and other parts of the world. So I think that I don't have a solution. I mean, if only. But I think it is something that we all need to reckon with. That these huge companies now pretty much own all the power, be they Chinese or American, and the extent to which innovation can happen in this setup is stifled.
I think that's really interesting. And in a festival like this, where we're talking about creativity and innovation and new ideas, it's actually quite hard to do when some players are so dominant.
And there's also an issue around political power and influence and bias as well. And I think these are just questions we should be asking more frequently of ourselves. And I don't know to what extent inside the big AI companies there are conversations around what to do when AI models become sentient. I mean, I'd love to know what those discussions were, but I hope they're having them.
I agree. Gregor, did you want to come in at all on the European technology space?
I mean, Emma is absolutely right. We are far behind, and Europe has to get its act together. I think we have done that successfully on defense now, where the conversation really has changed over the past 2 years. But again, then we are more focused on regulation, and in a way that is important too. I mean, if you look at social media, at the beginnings of social media, I think in theory it was a great idea. I remember the enthusiasm in the first Obama administration during the Arab Spring, where everybody thought, well, this is a platform to foster democracy, and then we realized after a few years, well, the bad guys are using it too, and maybe using it more successfully. So now the very same people are bringing us AI in many ways, or the people behind the companies. So in a way, I think it is right to be observant and watchful as well, but it's very hard to do the catching up and the regulating at the same time.
Don't you think it's a bit depressing that Europe once again is the one coming in with regulation rather than the innovation? I mean, I'm sure you agree, but it's really, you're right, regulation is important, but it's kind of always the pattern, isn't it? America innovates, Europe regulates. And it would be really nice if, on occasion, Europe could innovate.
Well, there's actually more innovation than one might think. I mean, at least Germany is doing AI-wise pretty well, but I would agree with you. I think the regulation is too much, and it's very difficult to strike the balance between it. But on the other hand, I think you would also agree that, well, there's reason to be concerned about the lack of regulation in the States on that matter.
I would.
Brilliant. Okay, I have lots and lots more questions, but I'm very conscious we have a beach full of people. So I wanted to open briefly. Has anyone got questions for the editors here, either around their jobs, their changing role of journalism, how that operates, or around the sort of broader picture? Anyone? If not, we will carry on. Ellana, I wanted to chat about those technology brands you mentioned and the technology companies in China and Asia.
So it's interesting, you talk about America's innovating, Europe perhaps not so much, but at some level, I see a lot of innovation from where I stand. And it's the way how you process, how you push innovation to society. So obviously China has the benefits of where it encourages its society to say, these are the 3 areas we're going to innovate in. So for example, for China, low altitude economies, those are the drones, those are the pilotless airplanes. Let's say quantum physics, and AI. Those are the 3 that they have mapped out, are the areas that they want to invest in. So what that does is then you start to attract funding, you attract money. So it becomes like the Silicon Valley VCs. Automatically the funding goes there. And I would say the brilliant thing about it is that it's very nimble in its ability to innovate and fail and try again. So there isn't this stretched out process of a 10-year horizon. And that's why you're seeing a mobile phone company being able to be an EV company. And also, I would say, like I come from Korea. I'm a product of America, but I also come from Korea. Korea is probably the most wired country on this planet. But that was also driven by the government in the sense that they wanted to make sure that broadband was available not just for the elites and the ones who had money, but it was available for everyone on an equal scale. That's why the broadband, and that's why Korea is where it is. And with this type of thought, that is long-term strategy versus every 4-year strategy, I think this is where you see the difference.
That's really interesting. And it doesn't seem to, that's a very planned out approach from Korea. It doesn't seem to me that the US has the same, but it does have this culture in it inherently of innovation and trying new things that seems like a different approach. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it is fair, but I think there are some really interesting dynamics going on at the moment. So I think your point about EVs is a really good one. Anywhere in the world now, apart from in the United States of America, you can buy a very good, high quality, affordable, Chinese-made electric vehicle. But you cannot. You could import one to the US, but it would cost you so much it wouldn't be worth it. And it feels like they're cutting off their noses despite their faces.
Absolutely. I had a friend in Dubai went shopping for an EV car. He went into the shop, 12 Chinese companies, 12 EV options he had. Of course, he had a Tesla option, but he had BYD plus 12. You know, that's just happened in the last 5 years. It's quite remarkable, the innovation, and that they're confident enough to bring that innovation to a global world market minus the United States.
Yeah, agreed. And I think there's a big missed opportunity at events like this, actually, because all of those car brands, Chinese car brands, are going to be launching and expanding across Europe. And at the moment, there's not as much chat about that as perhaps there should be. Those brands are going to be spending big. Right. Any other questions? Chris, we don't have a microphone for the audience. Do we have? Yes, we do. Corinne, can we have a question over here, please?
Test. It's really a question for Emma. I'm a big fan. I thought you did. We talked actually on the BBC about your campaign to get Evan out of Russia. It was hugely impressive. So I'm a big fan in that respect. But I'm just keen to know what Trumpism does to your brand. So I went to bed last night reading Elon Musk's comments about the Wall Street Journal, and he wouldn't line his cat
What's he
litter.
saying now?
I think he said he wouldn't line his cat litter with the Wall Street Journal, but I wonder if that's good for the brand and whether it makes. I mean, we all think back to CNN and what Trumpism did to CNN and its numbers in the first term, and I wonder if you're starting to see some of the same, that actually the Wall Street Journal is putting on readers because of the position it's taking.
I think that's a really important thing to think about for us. By sticking to rigorous reporting and being as fair and balanced, as objective as we can, and calling things out when they happen, we have benefited, is that the right word? Or people have come to us in very high numbers because they trust us to give them fair news. The thing that worries me is, I don't care. Musk can say what he likes about us. Trump can say what they like about us. But it's very important that we don't get sucked in and become players. It's, they can criticize us. They can call us out. He can call us, use the turd emoji for the Wall Street Journal, or what did he call it the other day? He called it the worst newspaper on the planet, and it should be renamed the BSJ. That was that was from Elon Musk. All of that's fine, but it's really important that the newsroom stays focused on delivering unbiased news and doesn't get sucked in, because I think what happened in the last Trump administration, a lot of the US media became part of the story and felt that they had a job to sort of stand up in opposition. And whatever they say about us, that is not our role. If we are to continue to be trusted, we have to keep delivering news that's fair and balanced.
I think I can only add from an European perspective who follows the reporting. I think we would all, or many of us would disagree with your opinion page, but the reporting you have done, not just on the Trump administration, but I also think on the Biden administration, on the health. Yeah, no, seriously, I think that was the most outstanding reporting that didn't really get picked up by other American outlets. So yeah, I would fully support that.
Thank you.
I think that's it actually, I kind of love about the media industry at the moment that while of course everyone is still competing and of course you want to get the scoop and grab the news first, there is it feels like there's a growing sense of we are all in this together to an extent.
100,000 subscribers.
To bring people together. Any other questions? Actually, we'll go to the back. Sorry.
Hey there, Jake from Conscious Advertising Network. Ellana, you were talking about the 12 EV brands that your friend had options to buy in Hong Kong. There seems to be a growing editorial line against the net zero transition and dealing with climate change, and at the same time this enormous coming wave of huge brands, as you were saying, Jamie, like BYD, will have an absolute bucket load of money to be able to spend in advertising and news. What do you think of that sort of conflict of the politicization of climate change and the transition and the economic reality of what is being invested in China and Korea and many other parts of the world?
Well, I think China is China and Korea and a lot of these countries who are so 100% supportive of EV are fast forwarding the conversation compared to what you have in the United States and very rich oil companies. I mean, BYD, yes, it's very big. It has a lot of money, and we had a previous, I think we had a previous panel here where you're talking about commercialization. The question is, they're going to have a lot of money to spend. It's going to be a question whether your company or your country is going to be willing to have that money spent on their outlet. Right now in the United States, it's really tough. If you want to host an event or you want to have Chinese companies sponsor certain content, there is a great amount of hesitation. And rightfully so, because you're going to have your congressman calling you and harassing you, right? And so I don't think that dynamic has sorted itself out at all. But it doesn't mean that because BYD is making a lot of money, there's going to be a lot of whitewashing as well.
That makes sense. I'm conscious of time. I have one quick question for all of you, but super fast answer, please. We did this last year. It's a similar panel in Cannes. What's one news story that you think we should all be keeping an eye on over the next 12 months that you think is maybe underreported at the moment? Something interesting happening in the world that not enough people are talking about. Emma, I'm going to come to you first.
people are reporting this, but I think they're not reporting it enough. The degree to which the level of pocket lining that is taking place under this administration, sometimes under the guise of crypto, sometimes sort of dodgy deals that are done outside the normal norms of diplomacy. I think everyone needs to keep an eye on that.
Brilliant. Thank you. Gregor?
It's hard to predict because it's changing so quickly. Just 3 days ago, I couldn't have thought what the cover story is today. I think there is this lack of reporting on the question that we have been struggling with. How do we get our more innovative side back in Europe and a more optimistic outlook for Europe and European innovation? I think that's really tough to report because we tend to be on the critical side in the news business, but I think it's an important one.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Ellana?
I think the innovation in the military space is really interesting. You know, companies that can build cars, companies that can have a lot of access to steel. You know, there are a lot of companies, specifically in Asia Pacific, that started off as creating weapons during the wartime, and they were dormant. They were not allowed to create. But in this world, with the shift in the geopolitical situation that's happening, I think it's the one sector that you're going to see a lot of movement, and there's not going to be as many regulations around it. You know, I see it already, like in places like Korea as well. Some of the areas, the industries, it's now going forward with the U.S. talking about maybe pulling its troops. You now have to defend yourself. So I think the innovation that's going to be taking place in those areas, you see a little bit in the drone space right now, but I think it's going to be far more far-reaching and really quite intense in those areas.
Brilliant. Thank you. I was not watching that one, but I think that's a really interesting trend to watch out for this time next year. Thank you all so much for your time. I think you've done a brilliant job of demonstrating how important it is that we have quality journalists doing amazing jobs for our brands and for our clients. Thank you very, very much.